Well, hello and welcome to the Cyber Safety Newz Show here on the Safety Newz Network. My name is Adam Blue. Today's episode is going to be pretty fun as we're going to be talking about an action movie starring Jason Statham that actually has a pretty cool plot that is very relatable or similar to the types of cybersecurity attacks we're seeing. So we're going to get into that and see how realistic it is, if that's possible. But also we're going to take a look at what the NSA and CISA is revealing as the top 10 cybersecurity misconfigurations. Just kind of briefly looking over it, I'm like, wow, this is a good checklist to use whether you run a security organization or you're in an organization where you care about its security and kind of see, okay, are we meeting these standards? But yeah, let's get into it. First of all, starting here with this movie that was just announced, trailer just released for this called The Beekeeper. I'm a huge action movie fan. I love things with Jason Statham, like The Transporter, things like that. So he's got a new movie coming out where he's doing the typical John Wick thing that we see, fighting bad guys with guns, doing martial arts, etc., etc. What was real cool about when I was watching the trailer was when you come across what is the motivation that the hero is going through to make them the action badass. And, you know, from something like John Wick, we have where, you know, unfortunately someone's puppy gets murdered and that puts John Wick on that killing rampage to stop everyone. So what's going on with the Beekeeper? It's very interesting because apparently there's a woman that Jason Statham is very fond of. They're very friendly. They go back. There's probably some background story on that. And she's on her computer and she gets a pop-up about a virus warning and that she needs to call a phone number to get it situated. Now, you've probably heard of this before. That's a scam that has been done before, like on your computer. It says you got a virus or there's an issue. Let's get you in contact with Microsoft so you can solve the issue when really someone's trying to trick you. So that's what's going on here. She calls, gives the information, I guess, that these hackers need. They use that to drain her bank accounts. With her bank accounts gone, she commits suicide. That puts Jason Statham into action man mode, and he goes out to take revenge. You know, a couple things are, you know, this isn't solely a cyber thing, although nowadays it's easier to trick people by using the means of cyber, whether that's your computer or a phone, and then coinciding with phishing attempts. This is an easy way that attackers can use old methods in newer ways. A long time ago, I actually was working physical security, and I had met someone that was there working with me. He was much older than me, and he was doing some more of the low-risk work, and he told me that, yeah, he got a phone call from someone that was going to help him with his finances and ended up just draining his bank accounts. And so the guy had no choice but to get this job work somewhere. And I always thought about that and how sad that was and how this stuff can happen today too, still for anybody. But now going even further with the easier means you have to trick someone with cyber attacks, I can see where this could be reality. Now, I don't know how they're going to portray them. If you watch the trailer, they show like the hackers in like this computer room with a bunch of pink neon lights and they're all dressed fashionable. And, you know, that could be just the goofiness to kind of give more character to the bad guys. Whereas in real life, it's probably just average person that just happens to have the ability to hack and cause harm, which at the end of the day, it's really just for their survival. Who really knows? It's just interesting to see how it's being portrayed in this movie. Let's see. It looks like January 12th is when it's supposed to be coming out. So that's pretty cool. Directed by David Ayer, which I don't know if anyone's too familiar with that director. He did that Suicide Squad, among other things. And it's written by Kurt Wimmer, which I got to say, that sounds familiar. Yeah, there's a bunch of movies to his name. Not all of them are that amazing, but it'll be cool to see when it comes out how this does. I'm a huge fan of Jason Statham and action, but just to see have a cybersecurity plot within it, I think is pretty cool. And can this movie kind of spread that awareness of, like, you know, don't believe the pop-ups you get on your computer? So anyway, That's that one. Looking forward to that. Next up. Now, this is from the NSA and CISA, and this is on Bleeping Computer. So, the National Security Agency, NSA, and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, revealed today the top 10 most common cybersecurity misconfigurations discovered by their red and blue teams in the networks of large organizations. So, I really like this list. It's really something to think about, and I'm going to talk through some of these if I feel it's important. So, for instance, and I'm going to zoom this in a little more, we have default configurations of software and applications. That's a good thing to call out, just the default configurations. So let's say there's some system being put in place where people have to access it or put data in there, and nothing was configured. It was just put into place. And maybe there's some configuration that's needed. Is it on a public or private network? Does it require certain credential access to get in? Yeah, something set to default, definitely a top item there. Number 2, improper separation of user administrator privilege. Now that's a good one because you could have someone considered an administrator in your environment or in any environment, and that they also have just regular user tasks. There's a lot of security programs out there, especially when it comes to like some of the Microsoft suite of security tools, where you can actually go through a process to elevate access for those elevated tasks, or sometimes it's recommended to have separate systems, one for accessing privileged information security controls, another one to do day-to-day tasks. So seeing the improper separation, I think, is another top thing that I see in the field all the time, where you have regular users without MFA as a global admin doing global administrator activities. That puts them at risk for sure. Okay. Insufficient internal network monitoring. Another one I see all the time when we'll look at resources that are in the cloud. We'll look at the configuration of the resource, which is almost calls back to this first one here, and that they are left on public networks when they shouldn't be. They should be private, or maybe certain like development tasks that need to be done on certain isolated networks, especially when it comes to development versus production. Sometimes it's best to have those in separate networks. It's for a multitude of reasons. It's who's having access to that, but also the type of data that resides. You don't want the wrong person getting access, or you don't want a shopping spree for someone getting data to go into one area and it has everything. Poor patch management. Now, this is a tough one because depending on what systems you're having to patch, you need to keep up with this, and you need to see what processes, what systems, what software is available for you to do this. But it's important to make sure things are up to date. I had a recent video on this, posted maybe about a month or two ago, one of the early videos, talking about how it is important to keep OSs, your software, patched and up to date. Usually patches are for the purpose of securing a security flaw or where they can see attackers can get in. Anyway, bypass of system access controls. Again, another one I see so often. Let's say we have MFA configured, multi-factor authentication configured for someone to get in and access resources. And then we'll see that they went in because they're an admin. That's that privilege thing we're talking about. And then they unchecked needing MFA because they don't want to be bothered MFAing. I think that's another video I made where you need to MFA into services. And so you can have someone just bypassing those security controls to get into where they want. So then if a threat actor gets a hold of those credentials, they get in. Let's see. Weak or misconfigured multi-factor authentication methods. I think we just talked about that a little bit. I see that a lot of these are related to each other. But yeah, you want your MFA to be as strong as possible. And you want to also educate your users on how to use MFA. Insufficient access control lists on network shares and services. So yeah, just another thing when it comes to where certain resources in your network are, where they reside. Do users that are accessing them have MFA? Do they have the right privilege? It's all kind of related here. Poor credential hygiene. This is an interesting one because it seems like the cybersecurity landscape is moving away from like passwords when it comes to credentials. And a lot of times now it's about using a device or something you have on you that can verify who you are. So poor credential hygiene could go, and it could relate back to some of the standards involved with like password length, the types of characters, etc. And then unrestricted code execution. This is one that gets down in the weeds, but depending on the type of work that is done in any organization, the code could be used in maybe programs or software applications that they have in-house. It could be as simple as what's used to access a front-end website. If this organization doesn't have any back-end software, anywhere that code can be executed is a prime space for a threat actor to get in, to wiggle the way in and do something. So there's a lot of alerting nowadays with a lot of security controls, especially I'm seeing it a lot in the Defender for Cloud, which is part of Azure, where you're getting alerting on how code is being executed or code is being used. I saw one recently where it's saying a WordPress theme. WordPress is a builder. You might be familiar with it for building websites, but there was an alert that a WordPress theme could be an issue, could have a threat involved with it. And that was actually pretty interesting to see. So, it is good to get this list. I would almost use this as a checklist, because as you are working as maybe security personnel with a company, or maybe you're just curious about your own security wherever you are, personal stuff or in your job, these are some things to keep in mind, not only for the tools or the controls being rolled out, but for the people using them. Because again, there's that layer that's missing when it comes to understanding cybersecurity, and that is the education for the end user. At the end of the day, just like we saw at the beginning of this episode with the movie, and the motive is the lady was phished for her credentials to get her bank account. It's all the hardest point to protect against is that end user, and education is all about that. So I think that list, link below, is kind of a good checklist to go by as you're doing your day-to-day security stuff. If you're in the IT field and you are deploying these security tools, something else to actually look at too. So, well, there we go. That's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about any of these topics. Any movies you've seen where they had some interesting cyber security motives going on, or any interesting movies or shows where you've seen them use cyber security, but it's laughable, it's hilarious, it's not as real world as it could be. Let me know in the comments below. But thanks for watching. We'll talk later.